Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today who is helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts and helping to keep us all safe. We have the honor today of being joined by Kathryn Coulter Mitchell, who is Acting Undersecretary for Science and Technology at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Whereas the Science Advisor to the Homeland Security Secretary, she heads up research, development, innovation, and testing and evaluation activities in support of the Department of Homeland Security's operational components and its first responders all across the nation. And the Science and Technology Directorate is responsible for identifying operational gaps, conceptualizing art of the possible solutions, and ultimately delivering operational results that improve the security and resilience of our nation. In her former role as Chief of Staff, Ms. Coulter Mitchell oversaw the operational organizational needs of the billion-dollar 500-career employee directorate. As a member of the Senior Executive Service, she was responsible for strategy, policy, organizational development, communications, and planning, and she guided the creation of the DHS strategic vision and roadmap for research and development, the reestablishment of the integrated product teams to help prioritize and manage R&D investments, and the crafting of various strategies for organizational effectiveness. And previous to that, she served as Science and Technology Development as Deputy Chief of Staff and Senior Communication Advisor for the Undersecretary and Deputy Undersecretary. Ms. Coulter Mitchell came to DHS after a 15-year career in the private sector and on Capitol Hill. In industry, she was involved in providing organizational strategy and communication support to the Directorate and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, where she authored communication strategies for the multi-million-dollar multi-agency rollout of the Presidential Policy Directive 8, which is a fascinating directive aimed at strengthening the security and resilience of the U.S. through preparation for various threats, including acts of terrorism, cyber attacks, pandemics, and natural disasters. And prior to supporting government, Ms. Coulter Mitchell was also a senior-level public affairs specialist at a top Washington, D.C. public relations firm. She holds a Master's of Art in Communications from Johns Hopkins, a bachelor's degree, University of Maryland, and professional certificate in executive coaching from University of Cambridge in the UK. A lot of really exciting things to talk with her about, and we're honored to have her. Kathryn Coulter Mitchell, thank you so much for come on to the show today.
Thanks, Ira. Absolutely. I'm proud to be here.
It's great to have you, and reading through your extensive bio, I'm always impressed by the journey of how someone like you got to where you are now. You have an interest in journalism and communications, and now running this major science, technology, and innovation engine for our country. Talk a little bit about the early days, if you would. How what got you interested in some of the areas like journalism and communications, and talk a little about your transition into the science and tech field, if you would.
Absolutely. I am definitely not your common federal leader when it comes to science and technology, but I took a little bit of a different route, but it's actually worked perfectly, and I'll let you know why. So as you said, I started as a journalism communications person, grew up in Washington, D.C., went to work on Capitol Hill because that's just what we do. We go learn how government works and how the city works, and I sort of fell for it. But while I was up there, it was actually 9/11 happened. And I was running like everyone else was, not sure where to go or how to protect ourselves, and jumped in my car and drove past the Pentagon and saw everything go down. And immediately following that, I decided Homeland Security was the direction I needed to go to actually try to make a difference. I didn't want that to ever happen again, or anyone else to ever experience that again. So I went and got my master's degree, and then started knocking on doors at DHS, and luckily found the perfect place to enter. I actually entered as a contractor. The first responder group was being stood up within S&T, where the research and development was coming over from the Department of Justice to the Department of Homeland Security. Well, a lot of things were being consolidated under the department, and I helped come in and stand that up. And here we are 15 years or so later, and I'm still there. I've gone out to a component or two and done some work, but have absolutely found a space of passion in this science and technology area, because we get to serve the components, all of our component partners, the Secret Service, CBP, USCIS, you name it, the whole gamut of the department, as well as the first responder community. So there's really not a boring day in our world, or any day that we're working on the same thing 2 days in a row, which is exactly what I love to do. We're always running, but on really exciting things. And I've just had the opportunity to work with some amazing leaders who've appreciated sort of having me by their side as advisors. And the next thing I know, teams change, and I am currently in this acting capacity, trying to hold down the fort the best as I can and continue the great work the organization is doing.
Wonderful. Well, you do a wonderful job at it, and it's thinking about sort of the purview of DHS currently. I mentioned some of these in the intro: anti-terrorism, border security, immigration, cybersecurity, major natural disasters, an incredibly broad purview. You have something, I think, about 250,000 employees. Thinking about some of the non-US audience that's listening to this right now, could you take us through just a little bit of the background of DHS in terms of sort of how a lot of it got, these disparate pieces got put together? Because we read through go to the Wikipedia page, it shows how components of our energy department, of our agriculture department, of the defense department sort of contributed pieces to what ultimately became DHS. Talk a little bit about that, if you would, before we get into sort of the science and technology part of it all.
Absolutely. So I came in a little bit after the stand-up. I wish I'd been there in the heat of it, because I think those just must have been incredible conversations about what to do very quickly after 9/11. And then a lot of evolution has happened since that, of course. But as everyone watched on the news along with me, it was really an immediate response to 9/11, how we pulled together what were disparate pieces at the time to try and consolidate and centralize some of these really important functions that we learned through 9/11 that would add a lot of value if they were more closely connected. So some huge analysis were done in some what must have been a really exciting conference room brainstorming sessions and conversations just about what these pieces are, where the value would come of them overlapping, and how that would actually work. And in the federal system, the how that would actually work turns out to be the hardest piece, right? Between authorities and budgets and how everything fits together. And I think they did an incredible job moving so quickly. And again, as I said, I think a lot of evolution has happened since that to try and streamline and to try and ease some of the bureaucracy between what were very, very disparate pieces of government with strong cultures, strong mission spaces, and having them all keep their individual cultures and missions, while at the same time joining this much larger department with a culture and a mission unto itself. So I think it's still a learning curve for everybody on how to keep all of that true, but also have a larger DHS sense of dedication and mission. It's just really exciting how it all came together, but continues to evolve on a daily basis.
And the Science and Technology Directorate, a critical part of this is so you serve there as sort of the core of the R&D component, and then once again doing a little sort of the background research, the directorate has various national laboratories around the country where a lot of this research is done. We just had Colonel Vic Suarez on the show about a couple of weeks ago from Fort Detrick in Maryland, working. He was actively involved in Operation Warp Speed and works in biodefense. Interesting one that popped up is you have a transportation security laboratory in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where I hang out during the summer. It's nice to know that's there. Talk a little bit again about sort of this general structure about how you're in Washington, but you have really a comprehensive network of research facilities focused on all these everything that could go wrong. Talk us a little bit through that, if you would.
Right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, our mission space is broad. It's literally the entire department. We're a centralized research, development, test, and evaluation hub in the headquarters of DHS. So our job is really to be that central conduit and sort of coordination function of research and development across DHS and the national first responder community and emergency management community. So it is a huge mission set, of course, with no funds that could cover any or all of it. We barely scratch the surface. So our job truly is to be that central hub and sort of central conduit to gather the requirements, but then go to this much broader worldwide community of experts and those doing R&D, both in the government, international, private, public sectors, to try and do what's best for the nation. And it truly is a worldwide effort. I've had the honor, so we have currently 14 international bilats in place with foreign countries, which includes 22 foreign countries. We have relationships to do R&D, to share information, again, to really try and supplement and complement each other's efforts so that we can divide and conquer for what's best for everybody's countries. As you mentioned, we have S&T specific labs that each focus on different topics such as bio or transportation security, as you mentioned. We also have a special relationship with the Department of Energy laboratories, which are amazing institutions across the country with some of the world's most experts in a lot of different fields. We also have centers of excellence, which is university programs, or we have direct leads for different centers under S&T, which then have huge networks of other universities under them. So we have hundreds of universities within our university system. And small business and innovation, technology groups. Just the whole idea is to create this worldwide accessibility and network that we can go out to literally whatever problem comes our way that the department or the nation needs good research on. We start with our people, and then we literally go out through this network to find the best information and the best solutions that we can find.
Awesome. And I've been following sort of the press releases over the months on all the different types of relationships that you've been involved in, and I think some of them, if we look at sort of these in different baskets, and the first one being sort of just generally how S&T and the directorate collaborates with the many other agencies that are out there, also keeping us safe. There's been a few in recent weeks. One was called Operation Titanic, where I think you're working with the Coast Guard to keep away icebergs from ships. There was another interesting one on I think this is the DoD, where you're looking at unmanned aircraft and defense in that. And then this one was called a jamming exercise, which sounded like fun, but it had to do with preventing first responder networks and communications from getting shut down during problems. You don't have to go into details of all these, but if you could talk just a little bit about how these relationships work, and sort of what happens first. Does this FEMA call you up and say, Kathryn, we have, we're getting jammed. How do we deal with this? How does it all work when you're dealing with some of these other agencies?
So now you can tell why we love our jobs, right? It's really cool stuff, and it's just coming from so many directions. So the way we work at the foundation is we gather requirements. Okay. So we go out to each of our components and the first responder community through a formalized process that requests their requirements. Where are their gaps? What do they wish they could do that they're not able to do? Either something faster, something in a completely different way, something cheaper. What are those gaps? And specifically, what could they have that would keep them safer while doing their mission? What are those gaps from each component? Then we look out to the department and say, where are those gaps that everybody has in common? Right, and our people work very closely with the components as they're identifying their requirements, to think, maybe a faster horse isn't what you need. Have you thought about this car? Right? How can we start taking you into the future? As well as really identifying, okay, you need better situational awareness, but what does that actually mean? What are we actually aiming for? So our people do deep analysis and work on really clarifying what these requirements are, what these gaps are. Look again across for common gaps, where of course, if we can help more than one group at a time, that will be our priority, as well as the first responder community. And then we start just looking at what the path is to solutions, both to solution to this existing problem, as well as the roadmap forward on what future solutions could look like. Is a perfect solution so many years out that we need a couple steps along the way of technology? Or is there actually a perfect solution that's within reach and what they have now will work till then? So it really is a hand-in-hand process with the end user of who's going to take it in. The last thing we want at S&T is to spend years doing perfect science, creating this perfect widget, go and say, here, end user, here it is. And they're saying, we don't really need that anymore. Or we found a solution already off the shelf, or we've moved on to something different. We're not actually now going to buy them. We really want to make sure that the very limited resources that we have for the mission size that we have is really gonna, we call it transition into the hands of people that can use it, whether it's technology or base the science that will feed something else they're doing or process improvements. We want to make sure there's a clear track to transitioning to those folks. So literally along the way from day one through a daily or weekly process to actual delivery, wedging budgets to make sure they're ready to buy them when we're really ready to hand them off. It's a true partnership between us and who we call our customers, but the components in the first responder community to make sure that they can actually use it. And then it's truly the private sector also. The real innovation that is going to solve all of these problems is not the government anymore. The government's, don't tell anybody I said this, but the government is not leading the way in many areas of technology anymore. That's what the private sector is for, right? And so it is just absolutely vital in our organization and all the other organizations across the government that are trying to solve problems is really to bring in industry early and communicate what those challenges are. And first and foremost, see what's already out there. Don't recreate the wheel. See what's already out there that people can tweak just for our processes and our use cases. But first and foremost, if we can solve a solution with something that already exists, we are going to do that. We're going to point them to the customer and get them going. But if something that is either good enough or that it doesn't exist at all, or the science doesn't exist at all, that's where we actually create programs and we bring in all of these partners as well as industry to craft that path forward and decide sort of who does what and how we end up getting there. So a lot of those examples you just read through, like the counter jamming exercise, this is actually it was an annual event, and then a COVID kind of threw a hole there in the middle, but that's a really exciting one where we bring out first responder community and industry and try and figure out how communications gets jammed. So that's truly what puts our first responders in a whole lot of risk, is when they can't communicate. So different we mine technologies, see what's out there, and do different exercises to try and jam so that we can then figure out how to not let it happen. So that was down at Redstone, and it's of course done in a very controlled area of a military base in the middle of the night, so no risk there. But it's really eye-opening, I think, to the first responder community about where gaps are and the need for new technology. And I think we are well on our way to identifying things that'll keep them safe pervasively. But it's a challenge, that there's always curveballs that come, and that's what keeps us moving on to the next thing. The Arctic was actually a really interesting one you talked about too, with the Operation Titanic. The Coast Guard came to us again through this requirements process and said, we cannot track icebergs the way we want to. Originally Operation Titanic stood up because and I didn't realize that icebergs came down in latitude actually as much as the equivalent of Massachusetts. They're actually, that's where the strike happened. So how we actually tag and track icebergs so that we can keep boaters safe, we can keep trade and commerce going. What used to happen is Coast Guard would send guys out on planes and boats and actually look at them, and the huge risk, huge resource drain. So how do we actually track these things through better ways? And try all kinds of things like tagging them, but of course things melt in different directions. And so really trying new ways like space-based and different types of technologies, really trying to think out of the box. That's what we're here for, new out of the box ways to do things like tracking icebergs so that we can keep commerce going, but also our people safer and be able to divert what would be those funds onto more needed mission spaces if we can solve the problem with technology.
Awesome. Really cool. Yeah, Kathryn, speaking about the private sector, so my background, I spent most of my career in the pharma and the biotech space, and a really hot theme nowadays there is so-called repurposing. If I have drug X over here for whatever asthma, hey, maybe it's going to be useful for chemical warfare countermeasure or something like that. But I'm not the scientist. I'm just giving an example. If I am a young startup innovator that has a cool idea, whether it's a repurposed drug or I have a technology to make an invisible force field over the whatever it may be, how do I, as an independent innovator, ultimately work with S&T? What types of things get me into Kathryn Coulter Mitchell's office? What technologies get me thrown out? What's a little bit of the process there if I'm not associated with the FEMA or the DoD at this point in time, but I have cool tech?
Yeah, so we're realizing this is where the really untapped potential is for solving a lot of these problems is we call the innovation community, but it's really so much broader. It's just those people who are not common partners with the government and those smaller, really out of the box thinkers again. But as the business of government, it is not easy to do business with the government, right? And we know that we don't move fast enough. Often we don't have the money to spend on certain things, especially in Homeland Security. The contracting vehicles are difficult. The whole business of government is difficult and does not incentivize or enable the innovators to really get in and help. And that has been a huge drive over the last few years. We've stood up the Silicon Valley Innovation Program, which started us as Silicon Valley, but truly now Silicon Valley has expanded worldwide. The whole mentality, which is innovation hubs, are just everywhere. So it really has become a national, but even international program to really reach out to this innovative community and put new vehicles in place and new processes in place that can enable that business to happen. So we've got different types of authorities that allow us to phase money very quickly to small startup type innovative companies that otherwise would never have been able to happen. We had the FAR, we swear by the FAR, but it takes you a good long time to get money out the door. So these are really new, innovative ways that have taken some time to perfect. But we are so proud. We've got prize authorities, which we put out very often, different calls for prizes, which bring in some just incredible, not just solutions, but a lot of the prizes are for ideas. Do you even have ideas on directions to go in a certain area or on a certain challenge? And then there's phases through these different challenges and through SVIP programs that take something really from idea or first concept through the program. The program also works a lot with, as incubators, working with small businesses, working with developing the next level generation of our workforce, really trying to get people thinking about these problems, hopefully coming to the government to help us, but really because of this nationwide network that's needed, just starting to take some pride and ownership in these challenges and excitement no matter where they go in helping us solve them. So we really have tried diligently and will continue to try setting up additional tools. We've got SBIR contracts, small business research contracts, different vehicles in place to enable that to happen, as well as just different opportunities for us to communicate our challenges. The thing I hear most often in my role when I'm out speaking to folks is, I want to help, just I can't figure out how to help and I can't figure out what you need. So we're really trying to also be much more deliberate and much more clear on stating what we need. The challenge always comes with when you state what you need too clearly, it shows a vulnerability. That's always the question, of course, that goes around. So the question, when you end up putting out what you need, it ends up floating to such a high level that we're saying, we need better communications equipment. And it's like, what can anybody do to help you with that? Because it's not specific enough. So really working to try and communicate those needs in a way that are specific enough to be able to get people working on the problems, but also, of course, not putting our people in harm's way by stating things too clearly. So this is the kind of thing my amazing team works on day to day with our customers, is really trying to figure out how to get the challenges out and how to get people working on the problems. And then at the end of the day, how to really transition them, get them in the market, get them into the hands of people that need them. And it's really a day one idea through a huge chain of events that actually get things out to the folks on the front lines.
Awesome. What you mentioned, Kathryn, earlier, I think you something like 14 different international collaborations, and I obviously think DHS and obviously Homeland, that we're focusing primarily here in the Homeland, but you have a lot of these really cool collaborations as well internationally. And there's one literally just, I think, a couple hours ago, the press release went out, but it had to do with DHS Science and Technology Directorate collaborating with the Korea's Ministry of Science and Information Communication Technology. Can you say, obviously, like, you talk about the specific relationship, but in these relationships, it's about, hey, Korea is doing something really cool here, that they have less cyber attacks than we do. We're learning from them. What are the international relationships all about? If you can talk about that a bit.
Absolutely, they're critical to what we do, because I think that there's a couple of things. Every country has its own specific specialties, right? There's certain countries that face weather and storms and flooding a lot more than others. There's other countries that are much more prone to different types of disasters or different types of emergencies, and we learn from each other. I was actually, we were just with the UK leadership a few days ago, signing some new agreements to work on some things we have in common, where at the same time I was meeting with the Swedish team the other day, where we were signing some agreements to learn from them in areas we hadn't touched yet, which is a lot of some areas of climate change and environmental work, because they're facing it so drastically right now that we're looking to learn from it. So everyone is different. I think everyone brings amazing strengths and insights, and there's also a huge value of having these partnerships in place when emergencies happen. So very, very few emergencies now are restrained within borders, sure. Right? Cyber emergencies happen, air emergencies happen, terrorism, there are very few. Weather emergencies go over borders. There are very, very few emergencies now that don't go over borders. And the whole idea is also to have this very tight group of partners. So when something like that happens, we can all mobilize together and go after the challenge, whether that's something like putting immediately somebody coming up with a solution to a problem, and we all implement it so it's consistent, or we all divide and conquer and try and take on different pieces of a challenge, or we literally take on different solutions, test them out, see which best, and then share what we found. And that is the real value of what different relationships around the world bring. And right now we have 14. We're of course always looking for additional partners, either full bilateral partners, or there's a lot of other levels of also international partnerships that we have at different levels in specific areas, where those either common challenges or drastically different challenges exist that we are looking to learn from each other. And some amazing accomplishments and enabling partnerships have been created through those international relationships, and the world's a much better place for them.
Excellent. Yeah. What, when it comes to sort of you obviously get a lot of proposals and business plans from companies and so forth about these next generation tools. As I mentioned, I come up with the biotech space, but I diversify myself a bit on this show. I've talked about artificial intelligence and quantum computing, and I've done a couple shows on directed energy. Why? Because I think laser beams are cool, but I don't know much about it, but they're really cool technology. What gets you excited? I mean, putting aside all the things that you see on a given day, what technologies looking out, specifically Kathryn Coulter Mitchell, wow, 10 years from now, that'll be cool, whether it's an invisible dome or something that could stop a hurricane or whatever it may be. What are the cool future technologies that you're specifically really interested in?
Oh man, so there's a lot of them. I tell you, my mind works a little bit differently though. Having been in this Homeland Security space for a while, what I do is we look for what's coming in the future, emerging techs, but we look at it, we think, oh my gosh, what are these things and how can we make use of them for the operations, right? How can they help us? The AI, the quantum, the machine learning, the 5G, 6G, 7G. How can we start getting our policies, our procedures, our technologies in place to be able to use these to help with the mission? But then there's that other side of what happens when these really cool things get into the hands of really bad people, right, who want to use them for nefarious reasons. And how can we start planning on how to defend ourselves and protect ourselves from those people? So in that mindset, it's also always sort of two-sided, which is interesting because almost every technology brings great and then brings just a little bit of forward thinking, the just in case scenario. So a lot of it, like let's say, AI, for example, is going to be pervasive. Of course, everybody knows. So really working right now with our components, we put an AI strategy out last year, which was the first we'd ever done on just sort of where AI is heading and in the Homeland Security space. And that's really what we're focused on now is trying to figure out where in the DHS world, what are our use cases going to be? How do we see our need here so that we can then start going to industry saying, as this develops, keep in mind our mission space, right? Keep in mind these needs and these opportunities. Also keep in mind these threats that could potentially happen with the development so that it's really baked in way from the beginning. And I think it's the same with the communications equipment. It's the same with everything. We always ask industry, as you're looking to the future, just keep a mindset of that other side too, to make sure that your product is used as intended. And that's the main goal. No company wants their product used unintentionally either. So how do we all just start from conceptualization and just start to think about these things, so that it does end up being just an amazing enabler to society and not the other way around.
Wonderful. What one of the things that one reason I started doing this show, I want to spread the word about cool STEM initiatives like what you're leading, and at the same time interest our next generation. I have 3 of that next generation in this house with me. They're sort of STEMish kids, but they're coming along. Take a couple of minutes just to tips, educational suggestions, advice of why STEM is so important in keeping us safe, and then suggestions, anything that you want to say. My kids are already going to watch this video, but others that are that are headed off to school, they want to work with you at some point. They want to be the next Coulter Mitchell and doing cool things like you're doing in keeping us safe. Give them a little bit of a message of why security tech, security STEM is so important in the coming years.
Well, thanks for that. I have to say, my daughter doesn't think what I do is cool at all. So maybe after watching your video, she'll come around a little. But I don't think our kids think what we do is cool. But yeah, I hope so. I have a daughter, and I hope she gets into STEM. Of course, whatever passion she follows. But it's just going to be so important, and especially for girls, but for everybody, it's really trying to open up and drive people into this area. Again, no matter whether they do it from the industry side or the government side or the not-for-profit side or the university side. I mean, science, technology, we like to call it STEAM, of course, now too, which is, even broader, is, just the importance of how things work, the asking the detailed questions about not just what you see on the surface, but actually how things work and how can we make them better. It's just at the core of, I think, what's important to be a human and a person to want to make things better in the world, in the country, but also in the world. So whether someone ends up going into one field or another, just really being the type of person that asks those questions and wants things to work the right way and never feels embarrassed about asking how things work is really critically important. So we do have a lot of work going on, again, in the universities to try and incentivize people into this space. Of course, we prefer coming to work for the government, but again, the partnerships are broad and varied across the world. And yeah, it's just going to be so important that the right people who care in this field going forward. And I'm so optimistic by what I've seen. I've gone around and spoken to a lot of classes and a lot of up and comers, and those who are on this track are so passionately excited about it, whether it originally stemmed from video games or I had a young girl who started reciting the periodic table of elements to me and said she was well on her way to memorizing the whole thing. I mean, I think it's a sense of accomplishment, and it brings people at the core of changing the world, and I feel like they can feel it, and I hope we can get more people just as enthused and getting involved in some dimension of the STEM world.
Excellent message. Kathryn, last question. So I can turn on the TV here, whether it's the Netflix or the Prime Video, and I'll get an endless array of documentaries and movies about terrorism and cybersecurity and natural disasters and real world pandemics going on out there. You're on the front lines of this all. You see it from a different perspective. What do you do to relax when you come home from work? I'm sure you don't turn on Netflix and watch movies about this stuff, but what do you do to relax in the evening?
No, well, I have a daughter, so that's kind of my whole life, and my husband falls in there somewhere too. No, I you know what, I love what I do, and people always ask me, what keeps me up at night, and I honestly, we work on this stuff so hard that I really don't, because my main goal is getting people the resources they need to do what they need. But man, we have got the smartest, most intelligent, most passionate people working on all of these things, that I really do feel confident that we've got this, right? We've got the right people in the right places that are going to keep people safe, and we just want to make sure we're staying ahead of it. So I like to say I go out and box or I run, but I don't. I like to read, and I like to hang out with my daughter, and yeah, we're Netflix people, but more Ozark, binge-worthy show type folks. But I take a break from it at night. I'm not going to, sit and watch crime dramas necessarily, but it's more for the fact that you take down the level and you just know that it's all under control. And I really do feel confident, and I feel like my daughter's future is going to be extremely bright and safe, and everybody else should feel that way too. So, yeah, I love what I do, and I hope people appreciate just all the things that the folks really on the front lines do on a day-to-day basis, because they really are fighting the good fight, and a lot of times don't get the appreciation or the recognition that they deserve. And man, they are doing an incredible job so that all of us can sleep really, really well.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you like that you're doing it, and I like that you're doing it and keeping us all safe. And it's a really exciting story, Kathryn, and just going to continue to follow everything that you and your team are doing in the public domain. And once again, just thank you for it. For everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode across our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been listening to Kathryn Coulter Mitchell, Acting Undersecretary, Science and Technology, United States Department of Homeland Security, doing amazing things in R&D, innovation, testing and evaluation, ultimately improving the security and resilience of our country. Again, thank you so much, Kathryn, for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us. Thank you for everything you're doing there at DHS. And as we like to say on this show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. Really very fascinating story.
Thank you very much.